The morning they came to take the cabin, Linnea had $3 and a sick goat. That was the whole of it. $3 folded inside her dead husband's boot, and a nanny goat named Tuesday, who hadn't given milk in 2 weeks, and stood in the corner of the barn coughing like an old man in winter. The men from the land office rode up before the frost. Had even burned off the grass. 2 of them. One in a wool coat that was too fine for the territory, the other with a face like something left out in the rain too long. They didn't get down from their horses. That told her everything she needed to know about how the conversation was going to go. Mrs. Hallett, the one in the wool coat, said he had papers. They always had papers. It's just Linnea now, she said. He didn't blink. The debt attached to this property came due at the end of October. It's December 3rd. She knew the date. She had been counting the days since August, since the wagon accident on the Clearwater Road, that had taken her husband caught and left her alone on 40 acres of frozen ground with a leaking roof and a debt she hadn't known existed. Until the letter arrived 3 weeks after the funeral. She had written to Court's brother in Manitoba. He hadn't written back. She had written to the land office requesting an extension. They had sent these 2 men instead. I have $3, she said. The one with the rain-ruined face almost smiled. The debt is $87. She didn't say anything. You have until Friday, the wool coat man said. After that, the property reverts to the office and we arrange sale. You'll need to vacate within 10 days of sale completion. It's December, she said again, as if that meant something to them, as if the word December in the Northern Territory carried any weight at all with men who had warm offices to go back to. Friday, he said, and they turned their horses and rode back down the track without looking at her again. She went inside and sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The cabin wasn't much. Court had built it himself the winter before they married, and it showed. The east wall ran a little crooked. The window frames let in cold air, no matter how much she packed the gaps with rags, and the floorboards near the stove had started to warp from years of moisture. But it was hers. It had been hers. She had hauled water and chopped wood and learned to preserve meat and kept a garden through 2 short summers and made it hers. And now it was going to belong to some man in a wool coat who would probably never set foot in it again. Her daughter Pell was 4 years old and asleep in the back room. She had her father's coloring, dark-haired and serious, and she had been asking for him less, and less, which Linnea didn't know how to feel about. She put her forehead down on the table and stayed there until the cold from the floor started creeping up through her boots. Then she got up and went to split firewood, because there was nothing else to do. It was the widow Fitch from the next claim over who first mentioned the name. She came by Thursday afternoon with a pot of soup and the look on her face that people get when they are about to say something uncomfortable and have decided it needs to be disguised as kindness. She sat across the table and watched Linnea eat and finally said, "Have you thought about going to see Quill?" Linnea looked up. "Aldrich Quill," the widow Fitch said. "Up on the North Ridge, past the Second Creek." "I know who Quill is," Linnea said. Everyone in the valley knew who Quill was. Not because anyone knew him well. Most people didn't know him at all. But because you can't live 40 miles from the nearest town in the northern wilderness without knowing which directions are safe and which ones have teeth. The North Ridge had teeth. Everyone said so. Quill had a trapping line that ran 40 miles in both directions, a dogs and mules outfit that took him into country that most men wouldn't touch in summer, and a reputation that was more made of silence than of anything anyone could actually confirm. He had helped a man named Garrett set his broken leg 2 winters back and hadn't asked for anything in return. That was the story people told. There were other stories too, but Linnea had always figured those were the kind of stories that grow up around any man who keeps to himself long enough. "What would I say to him?" she asked. The widow Fitch looked at the table. "People say he has money, gold from the trapping, more than he spends, which isn't much." She paused. He's alone up there, has been for years. Linnea put down her spoon. You're suggesting I ask him to? I'm suggesting you have options, the widow Fitch said carefully. That's all. I'm not telling you what to do. Lord knows I'm not in any position to tell anyone what to do. She stood and put her coat back on. Friday's tomorrow. She left the soup. Linnea sat with it for a long time. The fire crackled. From the back room she could hear Pell talking to herself the way she did, low and serious, having some kind of conversation with her dolls about matters of great importance. $87. She thought about what $87 would mean. She thought about what going to a strange man's cabin on the North Ridge would mean. She thought about Pell waking up Christmas morning in some cold room in town, in a boarding house, in whatever scraps of a life Linnea could reassemble from almost nothing. She went to bed. She didn't sleep. Before first light, she was dressed, and had Tuesday tied to the fence post with extra water, and told Pell she had an errand and not to go outside, and then she walked north. The trail to the second creek wasn't really a trail. It was more the memory of one. Something Deer had made, and Quill had occasionally widened by walking it himself, and it went up through stands of spruce that were so thick overhead the sky nearly disappeared. Her breath came out in clouds. The temperature had dropped in the night, and the cold had a particular quality to it, the kind that doesn't just sit on your skin but presses through to the muscle, to the bone, like it's testing whether you're worth the trouble of warming. She almost turned back twice. The third time she almost turned back. She came around a stand of birch and saw the cabin. It was bigger than she expected. Low-roofed and long, built from timber that had been squared off and fitted carefully. Not thrown together. There were skins stretched on frames along one wall, a stack of firewood that went up taller than she was and ran the full length of the building. Smoke coming from 2 chimneys. Dogs, 4 of them, big as small ponies, who raised their heads and watched hers with yellow eyes, but didn't bark. She stopped. The door opened. He was large. That was the first thing. Not fat. Not the way some men go large. This was the other kind. The kind that comes from years of work in hard country, from hauling and climbing and carrying weight through terrain that doesn't make any allowances for you. He had to duck slightly through the doorframe. His hair was dark, going grey, and he wore it tied back, and his beard was the same, and his eyes were. She would think about this later, try to find the right word for it. Measuring, like he was doing a calculation she couldn't see. He looked at her. He looked at the trail behind her, checking for whoever she'd brought with her. She hadn't brought anyone. I'm Linnea Hallett, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt from the Clearwater claim, the south-facing one with the crooked east wall. He said nothing. I need to talk to you about a business matter, she said. If you're willing. He stepped back from the door, not an invitation exactly. More like a door swung open, and she could walk through it or not. She walked through it. Inside was warmer than she expected, and tidier than she'd imagined. There was a table, 2 chairs, a stove that was doing its job seriously, shelves of supplies arranged with a precision that surprised her, maps pinned to one wall, trapping records in a logbook on the table. No decoration, nothing that wasn't functional, but nothing careless either. This was a man who paid attention to the things he cared about. He put a pot on the stove, without asking if she wanted anything. She sat down. She told him about the debt, about court, and about the letter, and the land office men, and the $87 and Friday, and what Friday meant for her and for Pell. She told it straight, without dressing it up, or trying to make herself sound worse off than she was, because she figured a man who'd been alone in the wilderness long enough to get good at it would smell embellishment from across the room. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. How old's your girl? He said. 4. He got up and poured something into 2 cups. Tea, strong. He set one in front of her and stayed standing, which made her feel like she was at a desk, in a schoolroom, except she was the one being evaluated. "You're asking me to pay your debt," he said. "I'm asking if we can come to an arrangement," she said. "I'm not asking for charity. I know how to work. I've kept that claim going by myself since August. I can cook, preserve, manage a garden, care for livestock. I learn fast." She paused. "I also have a goat. She's been off her feed, but she'll come right." Something moved in his expression. She couldn't have said what it was. "What kind of arrangement?" he said. It wasn't quite a question. "I don't know exactly," she said, which was the most honest thing she'd said all morning. "I haven't got very far in my thinking past Friday." He sat back down. He looked at her for a long time, and she made herself hold still under it, because looking away felt like losing something. "There's a room at the back," he said finally. "It's been a storage room. I'd have to clear it." She went very still. "I'm gone 3-4 days at a stretch on the line," he said. "Longer in high season. You'd be here alone more than not." "I'm used to alone," she said. "I know," he said, which surprised her. "I've seen your smoke. Winter, summer. Always just the one chimney going." She thought about that, the idea that he had noticed, that up here on the North Ridge he had seen her small fire and registered it all those months. "The $87, she said. "I'll ride down to the land office this afternoon. And in return—" "Don't," he said. It wasn't harsh. It was just final. "We'll figure the rest out. You don't need to put a name on it today." She should have pushed, should have needed things in writing, terms, a clear accounting. Any woman with sense would have. But it was Thursday morning and Friday was coming, and he had said, "I'll ride down to the land office this afternoon," with the same tone a person uses to say, "I'll put another log on the fire," like it was simply the next reasonable thing to do, and something in her chest that had been clenched tight since August unknotted just slightly around the edges. "My daughter's name is Pell," she said. "I know," he said again. She didn't ask how. She thought about it on the walk back down the ridge, through the spruce and the cold and the hard pale light, and she decided she didn't mind. She packed what she could carry. She left the furniture. Most of it had been Court's anyway, brought from his family's place. And took the cooking things, the bedding, Pell's clothes and her dolls, the seeds she'd saved from the garden in paper envelopes, labeled in her own careful handwriting, the boot with the $3 still folded inside it. Tuesday, the goat she loaded on a lead rope. Tuesday had opinions about this and expressed them loudly for the first mile. "Where are we going?" Pell asked. "North," Linnea said. "Why?" "Because that's where we're going." Pell thought about this with the deep seriousness she brought to everything. "Will there be other dogs?" "There are 4 dogs," Linnea said. Pell's face lit up in a way it hadn't in months. Aldrich Quill was at the cabin when they arrived. He had, in fact, ridden to the land office, and he had, in fact, paid the $87. She saw the receipt on the table, not shown to her, just there, the way you leave something in plain sight so no one has to ask about it. He had also, apparently, spent several hours clearing the back room, because, when she looked in it, had a bed frame with a good mattress, a small stove of its own, and a lamp hung at a height that suggested someone had measured where it would be useful. She stood in the doorway of that room for a moment. "It was a storage room," he said from behind her. "You said—" "The mattress was my mother's," he said. "Been in the packing crate for 12 years. Figured it might as well get used." She turned to look at him. He was looking at the wall. His jaw was doing something, and she realized after a moment that it was the particular set of a jaw that belongs to a person who is embarrassed, but would rather walk into a blizzard than admit it. "It's a very good mattress," she said. "It is," he said. They looked at each other briefly and then looked at different things. The first 2 weeks were the strangest of her life, and she had lived through some strange ones. Quill was not a man who made conversation for the sake of it. He could go a full day saying 4 or 5 words and seem perfectly content, but he was not unkind. She came to understand that the silence was not exclusion. It was just his nature, the same way some people have blue eyes and some have brown. He did things. He checked whether the storage room stove was drawing properly before he showed her how to work it. He brought in extra wood without being asked. He told her once where he kept the rifle and how to load it, stating it plainly the way you'd tell someone where the spare lamp oil was stored. Pell was not afraid of him. This surprised Linnea more than anything. The child had been quiet since her father died, subdued in a way that worried the people around her and broke Linnea's heart in small, daily pieces. But she took to Quill the way she had taken to the 4 big dogs. Without hesitation, without needing a reason, she followed him around the yard when he did his morning work. He didn't acknowledge this for the first 3 days. On the 4th day, Linnea looked out the window and saw him showing Pell how to test the snow, with a stick for depth crouched down to her level, and explaining something with more words than Linnea had heard him use in a row since she'd arrived. She stepped back from the window before he could look up and see her watching. The nights were long. The cold came down hard in January and stayed, and Linnea would lie in the dark in the back room with a small stove ticking and listen to the north wind press against the walls, and she would think about the crooked east wall of the cabin down below and wonder if it was still standing and who would see her smoke now. Nobody, she supposed. Nobody would see her smoke from down there. Up here it was different. Up here the smoke from 2 chimneys mixed together before it rose, and she didn't know exactly what to do with that thought, so she set it aside and thought about her garden seeds instead, and what she might be able to grow come spring. The trouble started in February. She had known, in a vague way, that there were men who resented Quill's territory on the North Ridge. Trappers whose lines he'd outcompeted, or thought they had. Men who had stories about him, and not the Garrett story, and not the kind that made him sound like someone you'd want to have a cup of tea with. She had not expected any of this to land on her doorstep. There were 2 of them. They came on a Sunday when Quill was 3 days out on his eastern line. One rode, one came on foot through the spruce, which told her they'd scouted the approach first, which told her this wasn't a coincidence. She had the door barred before they cleared the tree line. "We just want to talk," the riding one called. He had the practiced easy voice of a man who used it as a tool. She didn't answer. "Come on now. Woman alone? Up here. That's not safe. We're friendly." She looked at the rifle. Quill had shown her where he kept it. He had also, she now recalled, told her which window had the clearest sightline to the south approach. She had not asked why. She was grateful now that she had filed the information away anyway. "Go away," she said clearly. "Don't be like that," the riding one said. Pell was in the back room. Linnea had told her to stay there and to be very quiet, and Pell, who was 4, and understood more than most adults gave her credit for, had said okay and gone without argument, taking 2 dogs with her. The 2 remaining dogs were at the door, not barking, which Linnea had come to understand was not reassurance but the opposite. When they barked, it was announcement. When they didn't, it was something else. She got the rifle down. She had not fired it before. She had loaded it twice, for practice the way Quill had shown her. Her hands were steady, which she found surprising and then stopped being surprised by, because she had been steady in August too, and in September, and all the long cold months between. "Last time," she said, at a volume that she was fairly certain carried. The sound of horses then, coming from the north, coming fast, not the cautious pace of men on unfamiliar ground, but the particular urgency of someone who knows exactly where he's going. She heard one of the men below say something she couldn't make out. She heard the riding one laugh, but it was a different laugh now, a recalibrating laugh. Then she heard Quill's voice. She couldn't hear the words. She didn't need to. The hoofbeats of 2 horses leaving, fast, south toward the creek. She put the rifle back. Her hands were still steady. She was mildly proud of this and was going to keep it to herself entirely. She had the door unbarred by the time he came around the building. He looked at the retreating hoofbeats in the snow, then at her, then at the window she'd been standing at. "You scouted that window on purpose," she said. Yes, he said, when you showed me the rifle. Yes, you knew they might come. He was quiet for a moment. I didn't know. I suspected it was possible. He paused. I should have told you. You should have told me, she agreed. He nodded. He looked like a man who was doing the work of admitting something that didn't come easily to him. They'll come back, she said. Maybe. Less likely now. He looked toward the south. They don't like witnesses. There's only me. That's enough. She thought about that for a moment. Then she said, You came back early. The line was done. She looked at him. He was looking at the ground, at the snow, at the hoofprints the men's horses had left in it. Quill, she said. He looked up. Thank you. He nodded once and went to put his horse in. March came, and with it the kind of thaw that doesn't commit. Cold mornings, surprising warmth in the afternoon, mud that froze overnight and had to be broken through again, each morning. Tuesday the goat had finally recovered and was giving milk again, which Pell celebrated as a personal triumph. Quill had built a small enclosure for her on the south side of the barn, where the wind wasn't so cruel. Linnea had not asked him to. He had simply done it one morning while she was inside. And when she saw it, she'd had to take a moment alone with the woodpile. They had fallen into rhythms she had not planned for. He would be gone 3 or 4 days, back for 2, gone again. When he was home, he ate what she cooked, which he did, without comment initially, and then, gradually, with a specific kind of silence that she came to recognize as the silence of someone paying attention and appreciating it. Once he said, about a pot of beans, that they were good, and the way he said it was the way some people would say, this changed my life. She laughed. He looked startled, and then he looked at something across the room, and she noticed the edge of his mouth. Pell had started calling him by his first name, Aldrich, which she pronounced Aldrich with perfect confidence, and which Quill received with an expression that she could only describe as someone carefully, not being undone by something. She'll start calling you by your first name every time she's decided something is a fact. Linnea told him one evening. She was mending. He was working on a piece of harness at the table. I noticed, he said. It's a compliment, she said. She only does it with people she's decided to keep. He went back to the harness. She went back to the mending. The stove made its sounds. The dog settled. Spring's coming, he said, after a while. I know. Your claim down below. The land office has it listed as mine now since I paid the debt. I haven't. I didn't do anything with that. The listing. She set down her mending. Quill, I'm not asking anything, he said quickly. I want you to know it's sitting there if you want it back, in the spring, if you'd rather be down there. She thought about the crooked east wall, the window that let in cold, the one chimney, the way nobody would see her smoke. I planted those seed packets I brought, she said, in the cold frame you built. He looked up. I figured you'd need the garden space in spring, she said, so I planted for 2, approximately. He was very still. Unless you'd prefer I hadn't, she said. No, he said. He stopped, started again. That's practical. It is, she said. 2 people need more garden than 1, considerably more. He picked up the harness again. She picked up the mending. Outside, the wind had a different sound now than it had in January, less like a threat, more like something moving through without intending to stay. Aldrich, she said, testing the sound of it. He looked at her. The east room, she said, the one that was storage. Is there any reason it needs to stay the back room? He was quiet for a long time, long enough that she thought she'd misjudged something, gone too fast, or said it wrong, or read the whole winter incorrectly. No, he said at last, no particular reason. She nodded. He nodded. The fire crackled, and Pell made sounds in her sleep from behind the door, and Tuesday. The goat moved in her enclosure outside, and somewhere north of the second creek, a wolf called once and went quiet, and that was all. In the spring, the garden came up twice as full as anything Linnea had managed alone on the south claim. She kept the $3 in the boot. She figured she might not need them, but she liked the weight of having them, the small, hard fact of her own preparation. Some mornings she would look up from the cold frame and find Quill watching her from across the yard, not saying anything, just watching, and she would go back to what she was doing and feel something settle in her chest like the first warm day after a long winter. Not sudden, not dramatic, but the kind of warmth that means the season has actually turned, and this time it's going to hold.